Well, we know for sure that Penn State is going to finish number one at the Big Ten tournament, but it's not a guarantee that Iowa comes in second.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are locked on to some Big Ten wrestling. Thanks so much for making this Locked On Crossover your first listen and watch today. My name is Zach Seyko, the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Trent Condon, host of Locked On Hawkeyes. And we are breaking down the Big Ten wrestling tournament that is set to take place this Saturday and Sunday. At the time of this recording, we still don't have the official pre-seeds, but I think it's safe to say where everybody is going to line up in their brackets. Today's show is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in the episode. Please leave a like on this show, share it with friends and family. More importantly, let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the conversation. And if you are new to our shows, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. So Trent, we know that Penn State is going to dominate at the Big Ten tournament. We know that they're going to dominate at NCAAs, but it's not exactly a guarantee that Iowa's going to finish in second because of Nebraska, because of Ohio State. Now, personally, I think Iowa still finishes in second, but what is the concern level for the Hawkeyes that the Cornhuskers and the Buckeyes make this a little more challenging?
You know, after we talked before the Penn State-Iowa duel and the week after that, I thought it was going to be real trouble. I would tell you one thing. I was incredibly impressed the way that Iowa has bounced back after that dual loss and just getting pulverized by the Nittany Lions. You hate to say that it was a dead season already, right? That they were going to be in that kind of trouble, but I was impressed of what they've been able to do. And maybe my concern of not even finishing in second place in the Big Tens, that is dissipated. Now, it still could happen. I mean, we know that. And we've seen this happen to some Iowa wrestling teams in the past, but normally you kind of see this coming where you see, boy, they look tired. They look lethargic. They look like there's nothing left in the tank. And that does feel a little bit different this season from what we saw at the end of the regular season. We've talked about this before, Zach, and you know this. Ultimately, for Iowa to track down Penn State, it's going to take basically everything that could go wrong for Penn State to go wrong and everything that could go right for Iowa to go right. And even then, it might not be enough, but maybe it'd be close in that scenario. That's what we're still talking about here. But yeah, I'm excited about this and hoping more than anything, kind of big picture going forward, because we've seen some of those lethargic Iowa Big Tens, NCAAs here recently. Maybe the Brands brothers and company, maybe they've come up with a new formula and keeping a little bit more in the tank for these guys when we get to March.
And that's just it. I mean, there's a lot of wrestling that's going to go on, and Iowa certainly challenges itself by scheduling in Oklahoma State to finish the season. I've given my take on why Penn State doesn't have that that non-conference high-profile matchup, but just to kind of give a Reader's Digest, it's because they don't have to, and I know Iowa chooses to, but they've proven everything over the course of the regular season, the way they defeated Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio State, etc. here. But I think that is a point of debate that does Iowa go into this maybe a little exhausted at the end of the season, and Penn State's rejuvenated and ready to go? Because the chatter over here is, well, Braden Davis is the healthiest that he's been. And we know that in a similar case, Ja'Cory Teamer has been dealing with injuries throughout the season. So kind of an eye for an eye in that instance. So when you look at Iowa's lineup overall, what are the weight classes where we need to hit this home or else we do lose out to Nebraska? Ohio State does steal a couple weight classes from us, and somehow we end up in third by proxy.
You know, I think you start right at the top with 125 and what we've seen from Joey Cruz this year. It's been very up and down. You guys saw the low of it, the loss to Lindendahl in that duel, but he's got a lot of nice victories this year, a lot of high-quality victories that he's been able to beat some of the better wrestlers in the NCAA. I believe he has 6 ranked wins on the season. So, you know, Joey Cruz would be a guy. I could see him finishing anywhere from third all the way to 8th. And, you know, then you get into that tricky criteria, what the number is going to be and the qualifiers and the like. So Joey Cruz is one guy that I would start with on that front. And then the other one, I think the major one is going to be at 141. It just has been a hole in the lineup all season long for Iowa. Cullen Schriever is the projected, at least from Flow Wrestling, the 11 seed in this one, as you mentioned a little bit earlier. Crazy. We're sitting here recording in the middle of the week, and we still haven't got those pre-seeds yet from the Big Ten. But Shriver would be the guy that you'd look at there. If he can get up there, potentially just punch his ticket in, maybe score a point in the backside of the bracket, things like that. That's all you're looking for. But it's just been such a hole in the lineup. Those would be probably, I think, the two spots that have the biggest concern of just qualifying for nationals.
I got to get your thoughts on it. And I know we're going to break down each individual weight class, but I want to jump to 149 right now just because of the projection. Kyle Parko is the 3 seed. Somebody who goes 17-1 overall, defeats the projected number 1 seed in Ridge Lovett, and you get punished. No good deed shall go unpunished here. So Kyle Parko has to be, and Iowa have to be angry that they're going to that he's going to end up being the 3 seed. And then he has a difficult path in the sense that you're going to face the Shane Van Ness in the semifinal, most likely.
Well, and I think it goes back to what we saw in just the domination by Van Ness in that match at 49 when the two went head-to-head. You got the 3 wrestlers, all of them with an argument at minimum to be that number 1 seed at the Big Tens. But it comes down to Parko, margin of victory for Van Ness pushes him over the top. In fact, if I was Van Ness, I'd almost be arguing he should be the number 1 because
that's what I'm saying.
We got 2 close ones there. And if it goes that direction, regardless for Parko, he's either got to beat Lovett a second time in the semifinals or he's going to have to beat Van Ness in the semifinals. Both of them appear to be pretty difficult there. Parko has nothing. And speaking of inconsistency, he's been such an interesting guy. Outside of the Van Ness one, there's been times, this is going to be a major decision. Maybe he's going to get even more bonus points, tech fall, a pin, and he just not all the time does it. And then there's times he looks absolutely tremendous. Maybe one of the more inconsistent elite level wrestlers that I can remember here lately for Iowa.
To kind of give the same perspective for Penn State, looking broadly across the weight classes, 125 for Iowa, 125 is a point of contention. Okay, there's some tougher paths for a Kyle Parko or a Ja'Cory Teamer in this case. For Penn State to go from, a solid margin, right? This was expected. But to make this unprecedented, to absolutely just wipe out the rest of the competition. Luke Lillidahl is going to have to surprise some people and take out potentially a Matt Ramos early. He's going to face him at some point. I think as that projected 4 seed, he's going to have to surprise. And then you have Braden Davis, who I think when healthy is not necessarily just as good as a Drake Ayala or a Lucas Bird, but it's closer. They're a lot closer than people realize. He won a Big Ten tournament a season ago as a true freshman at 125. I get it, different circumstances. 133. He's gone through some growing pains, if you will, some injuries. Maybe not necessarily metaphorical growing pains, but Braden Davis is not a bad wrestler. He's not a liability. He's shown that he can defeat All-America talent when he's not 100%, when he's closer to 75. So if you do get him as close to 100% as possible, changes the entire complexity of it. And then it's those toss-ups. So can Greg Kerkvliet surprise? Can Bo Bartlett make sure that he defeats Jesse Mendez once again? Not in the regular season, but in the postseason when it really matters. Other than that, Penn State's got it locked down at 57, 65, 74, 84. 97's another one of those where Josh Barr can get some extra points by defeating Cardenas again. So we're going to go through all of those, each individual weight class, but that's the blueprint. If Penn State wants to turn this from, okay, solid margin of victory to, whoa, this is the best team in history. And that's why we're going to go through each individual weight class one by one to break down the paths for the respective Penn State and Iowa wrestlers. That is coming up next here on this Locked On crossover. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and all the new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On college basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. From top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets, these guys showcase the strength and the sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada and clear-cut Team of the Week are the Houston Cougars. Since joining the Big 12 last season, the Cougars have gone a combined 33-4 in conference games, winning the regular season title by multiple games both years. There is no team in college basketball that more capably embodies the rugged Armada than Kelvin Sampson's squad. Houston's tenacious defense leads the nation in fewest points allowed per game for the second straight season. when it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Houston Cougars have done here. It's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. That is NissanUSA.com.
Welcome back. It's a crossover edition. Locked On Nittany Lions with Zach Seyko. I'm Trent Condon with Locked On Hawkeyes as we start to go weight by weight here through the 10 weight classes on the collegiate level, getting ready for the Big Ten tournament. Again, we are still awaiting those pre-seeds, so we're just going off of some projections here, which is absolutely wild, but we'll take it as we can. All right, let's stop here, Zach. Start at 125. The projections from Flow Wrestling have Lindendahl with the 4 seed, Joey Cruz from Iowa with the 5 seed. Personally, I'd like to see Cruz drop down to the 6 and be potentially on the bottom half of that bracket from Ramos and company, and of course Lindendahl after what we saw in the duel. That's what I personally hope for here. And that path for Luke, that's going to be difficult because that means a semifinal, obviously, against Matt Ramos at Purdue.
Well, and that's just it. You get a rematch where Luke Lillidahl ended up tech falling Joey Cruz the last time that they met. So this is a large gap in the 4 versus 5 matchup here, hypothetically, between Lillidahl and Cruz. And I would take Lillidahl again. I've been talking about that throughout the week, that, try to avoid Matt Ramos or whatever. You're going to have to face somebody in this bracket, whether it's because Lillidahl versus Caleb Smith was close. So, but Joey Cruz, he's going to get knocked out at some point. It's just a matter of, or knocked down to the consolation bracket. It's just a matter of when. Is it against Lillidahl? Is it against Matt Ramos? Whereas I think Lillidahl does have a chance to upset Ramos. I think Lillidahl has a chance to win the 125 title as a true freshman, like his counterpart, Braden Davis, once upon a time last season. So that's kind of the difference here. 125, the sky is the limit for Penn State, whereas I think there's a clear path for what Joey Cruz is going to have to do here. Maybe he can wrestle back and finish third at consolations, but I don't know that it's going to be any better than that.
Yeah, it's just about punching your ticket to nationals for this one, I believe, from the Iowa perspective. Joey Cruz making his way in and making himself at least getting to the final 33 in the NCAA tournament. Let's jump to 133. This is where Iowa, one of their number 1 seeds, likely Drake Ayala, a tremendous season that he has put together. He sits as the number 1 seed. And for Iowa to get that stranglehold on the number 2, it's not just Drake Ayala winning 133, doing it with some bonus points along the way.
Yeah, and that's what I fully expect. I think that Drake Ayala is going to pick up some bonus points, but is it a guarantee that he wins the Big Ten title outright? I mean, Lucas Bird, just watching him against Braden Davis and seeing him at the NWCA All-Star Classic, I think Lucas Bird is a national title contender. I know that Ayala has defeated him in the past, but it's kind of like Bo Bartlett and Jesse Mendez. That doesn't mean anything just because of the way the last matchup went up. So for 133, are you confident that Ayala wins?
Yeah, I am. I feel really good. He looks to be just wrestling tremendously. I think that he has a pretty big advantage here. And this is a guy, I may be about as confident in him as almost anybody on the Iowa roster. I think he's got a really good shot of ultimately winning that championship and likely with a Big Ten championship that's going to punch his ticket as the number 1 seed overall at 133 when we get to nationals. Moving on, we go to 141. And we talked about this one, Zach, a little bit earlier. You guys are obviously in great shape with Bo Bartlett, and for Iowa, this is their hole in the lineup. It's kind of the most concerning weight, certainly from the Hawkeye perspective. Any concerns at all for Bo Bartlett?
I want to throw something in about Braden Davis real quick, and then get to Bo Bartlett. For Davis, I think he can finish. I think he should finish third. I think the Drake Ayala, Lucas Bird, Braden Davis podium is very likely at 133. It'll, even with Braden Davis at 100%, I don't know, or close to it, I don't know that he gets through Ayala or Bird in this case, wherever he ends up, because he could be seeded 4th, he could be seeded 5th. I've seen people seed him 6th. So it depends what his path is, but I think when he runs, he is the 3rd best wrestler in this bracket, and I think that's where he'll place. For Bo Bartlett and Jesse Mendez, yeah, that's the concern, because it's deja vu all over again. Yeah. Is that Bo Bartlett did this last season. He won in the regular season and then ultimately lost in Big Tens and NCAAs, and that's what everybody remembers. Oh, you won the regular season duel. Well, what happened in the postseason? So, it's shaping up to be a similar situation just because of how good Jesse Mendez is. But Bo Bartlett can win on any given day. Jesse Mendez can win on any given day. Andrew Alirez, when they're factored into the three of them, it is that close of a race overall at 141. I know that we already talked about it. Iowa probably won't have anybody near this part of the bracket, but it'll be interesting to see how Bo Bartlett responds in the exact situation. Just try not to let history repeat itself.
Zach, another intriguing one that we talked about at 149, touched on this one, the three-way kind of round robin that's happened this year. Lovett fell to Kyle Parko. Van Ness beat Parko and beat him decisively, and then Lovett got the win against Van Ness. So all three of these guys have shown success against one of them and losses on the other one. Interesting how this is going to play out. We do know, though, in whatever order, when the seeds come out, these will be 1, 2, 3. And I believe that there is a chance, Flow Wrestling has Lovett as the number one. I think Van Ness is going to get it personally. How about you?
That's the argument that I made. I think that now this is strictly from the Big Ten point of view, but something's got to give, right? There is no clear piece of evidence that says Lovett's the number one wrestler here. Van Ness is, I think Van Ness has the best case because of margin of victory and overall record. And Van Ness, being the number one wrestler makes a lot of sense to me, but there's a loser in all of this because none of these wrestlers deserve to be the 3 seed. Let's just put it that way. Because even though I might think that, okay, well, Van Ness should be the number 1 seed. Okay, then that means Kyle Parko's the number 2 seed. And then that means that Ridge Lovett's the 3 seed.
Right.
So something's got to give. So I understand the precedent that, well, Ridge Lovett is the defending Big Ten champion at 149. So you have to use something. I think it's overall record in this season because this season is what counts. And that's where you just have to factor it in because you really don't have a lot of other points of contention here. You don't have a lot. I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that debate amongst the coaches. I think that Shane Van Ness is, regardless of seeding, the number one wrestler at 149. I think it was a learning experience to go up against Ridge Lovett, but I do think Van Ness is actually better. We've seen this for Lovett. Lovett had a really strong season last year, and then I don't necessarily, he would probably say it, that he fell apart when it came to the postseason. For example, Tyler Kasak had a major decision against him as a true freshman after Ridge Lovett dominated him the first time that they met. So Lovett, as a veteran, ends up falling to a true freshman. It seems like when Lovett gets to these points in the postseason that he's not as solid of a guarantee to win the big matches. I don't know if it's a clutch factor. I don't know if it's running out of steam. I don't know if he was dealing with an unknown injury last season, but whatever it is, that's kind of my concern, is that Lovett isn't at his strongest when we get to the postseason. So Shane Van Ness and Kyle Parko are the, subjectively speaking, number 1 and number 2 wrestlers in my mind.
We go to 157 pounds as we make our way through the first half of the Big Ten Wrestling Tournament. And at 157, Flow Wrestling has Ethan Miller projected as the number 1, nationally ranked number 5, but no goose eggs against Big Ten opponents, and that's a big step up for him. Kasich as the 2, then Antrell Taylor as the number 3 seed, Ja'Cory Teamer from Iowa at number 4. That means if we play out according to the seeds, the semifinals would be Miller against Teamer, Kasak against Taylor. I'll be interested to see. I think there's going to be plenty of arguments in the room for this one at 157.
I think it's actually pretty straightforward, as Ja'Cory Teamer and Tyler Kasak are going to rematch. And Ethan Miller, it's respectable. He went 20-0. And the reason that Kasak is the 2 seed is because he ultimately injury defaulted against Miller and of Maryland. And that's a head-to-head matchup. And it's an injury default. It's not a true victory. You can make a case for Kasak. You can, but when you injury default at Big Tens or NCAAs, you lose. You fall to the consolation bracket. So you kind of have to apply that thinking here. Ethan Miller, speaking from the results, should be the number 1 seed. Kasak as the 2. Ja'Cory Teamer kind of has a subjective element here just because he hasn't wrestled the entirety of this season, but just because of the national rankings that he's a top wrestler. If Teamer's the 4 seed, that is an ideal path for him because I think he's better than Ethan Miller. And then him and Kasak get that rematch, hypothetically, in the championship.
5 weight classes down, 5 more to go as we preview the Big Ten Wrestling Tournament. Zach Seyko from Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm Trent Condon from Locked On Hawkeyes. We continue as we finish up the 5 weight classes on this crossover edition of Locked On.
$165, we know how this is going to go. It's going to be Mitchell Messenbrink and Michael Caliendo. And it's going to be Messenbrink winning, but what is that margin? Now that's just because history continues to repeat over and over and over again. Regular season last time, Big Tens, and did they meet in NCAAs? Why I'm completely blanking on that. So it's just every step of the way that Mitchell Messen, and then regular season this time around. So we shouldn't really expect anything different. Caliendo has gotten so much better. He looks like he could win an NCAA title if Messenbrink wasn't there, but Messenbrink is there, and he's going to be there for the next couple of seasons. So, put all of my money that it's going to be Messenbrink and Caliendo in the championship, but Messenbrink wins.
Well, and from the Caliendo perspective, I mean, we saw what happened, obviously, in the duel, and it was domination for Messenbrink, and it's been domination for him. He's just such a tremendous wrestler and such a great athlete. But, for Caliendo, all right, you come up with a game plan, right, for this one. And like you said, the other thing about 165, we talk about the depth of all these weight classes in the Big Ten. That is not the case of 165. No. In fact, after the top 2, I mean, that drop-off is precipitous at that weight class. But that aside, for Caliendo, all right, let's come up with a game plan. Try something different here. See if it works in that championship match. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. It's all about winning a national championship, right? So come up with a game plan. Try something new. Try something different. Try something a little bit crazy. If it goes poorly, that's okay. You're still going to be on the other side of the bracket from Messenbrink when we get to nationals. So I think that's got to be the game plan here. You got to come up with a different game plan and see if there's anything that you can find out on the mat on that Sunday that gives you potentially some kind of path to win nationals when we get there coming up in a couple of weeks.
I'm also eager to see, this is where Nebraska might surprise in an instance, maybe at least make it a point of contention, where Christopher Mento has a lot of potential as a freshman, 18-2 in his first year starting for the Cornhuskers. So I'm not saying that he upsets Caliendo. I think Caliendo could win an NCAA title if it wasn't for Messenbrink, but Mento, if he peaks at the right time, at least makes it interesting, and why Nebraska is debatable, maybe taking that second spot. So we go to 174. Patrick Kennedy will represent Iowa. Levi Haynes will represent Penn State. This is similar to 165 in the sense of Penn State has this weight class locked down. I'm eager to see Carson Harchla again against Levi Haynes, but I'm fully expecting Haynes to win the 174-pound bracket and become a 3-time Big Ten champion here. Patrick Kennedy is most likely going to be the 4 seed here and would wrestle Haynes, and we saw how that went the first time around. So Kennedy doesn't seem like he's going to avoid Haynes at any point in time prior to the championship.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to be on that top side of the bracket with Haynes there, likely facing him in the semifinals as long as he can get past the number 5 seed, because the top 4 pretty solidly, I think, in the book there. Pinto, with that head-to-head that he has, is going to definitely help out. But when you look through this weight class, and that's Kennedy, hoping to get that number 3 seed and stay on the other side. But right. Yeah, overall, Haynes, the gap is really significant. And I got to give a shout out to my cousin, Lucas Condon, the potential 11 seed out of Wisconsin. He's actually not my cousin, but we don't see many Condons in athletics, so I get excited when I see Lucas Condon there for the Badgers.
I'll certainly be rooting for him to shake up the power structure, power dynamics of these brackets, because I feel like we have easy answers when we're discussing most of these. Yes. In this case, sometimes you just want to see absolute chaos here. At 184, you're not going to see that. Maybe at 197. Maybe at 197 in the top of the bracket. But let's go through 184. And Gabe Arnold's going to be in. Carter Starocci is the projected favorite. It's most likely that we're going to see Max McAnally of Minnesota versus Carter Starocci, 1 versus 2. And McAnally's really impressive. I'm eager to see where McAnally is in his development as a freshman wrestler going up against Starocci. Trent, if you can speak to the crowd that says, well, Angelo Ferrari should be entered in. Yeah. Gabe Arnold's been benched multiple times now, and we see why. I imagine if for me, that would shake my confidence. But just regardless, I think the bigger thing is here. Yes, we're probably going to see Starocci versus Arnold at some point in this bracket if they project 1 and 4, which they do in the semifinals. But Angelo Ferrari, I would never burn his red shirt in this instance, even though I would hope that Iowa for whatever reason, did.
Yeah, and it comes down to that. I was not winning a national championship this year. Penn State's going to win it. And so you look towards the future, and the future is Angelo Ferrari, a potential 3-4-time champion. That's the what he's shown certainly during the campaign here in his freshman year and what he has put together. This is going to be a guy to be messed with the next 4 years. But yes, you maintain the redshirt status. Gabe Arnold's a very good wrestler. Gabe Arnold likely is going to be an All-American this year. So it's not like you're putting out some stiff out there on the mat for it. Just you have a guy a little bit better, and they'll figure out going forward what that means. Gabe Arnold potentially, can he cut back and be a 74-pounder next season? They'll worry about next year, next season. And the here now, Gabe Arnold, punch that ticket to nationals, get your shot against Starocci, and maybe get your nose rubbed in the mat a little bit after some of the comments going into the duel, when, of course, he didn't go out there on the mat. But that'll be fun to watch, and I think it'll add a little extra juice there to 84.
It just doesn't carry the same interest for me, because the way that Arnold was benched not once but twice, you talk all that talk back to when you were in high school, and now it's okay, Starocci versus Arnold finally happens, and that's how I look at it. It's just happening. Who cares? Who cares what? Because that talk doesn't carry the same weight anymore. So be it. 197. Well, I mentioned chaos, but that's because it's kind of like any of these other 3-man races at 149, eventually 141 when Andrew Ramirez gets involved with Jesse Mendez and Bo Bartlett. 197, these are 3 national title contenders. Stephen Buchanan, Josh Barr, Jacob Cardenas are the projected 1, 2, and 3 seeds, and they're the top 3 national title contenders at this weight class. Trent, maybe you want to make the case for AJ Ferrari saying that but I think one of these guys is winning the national title in addition to the Big Ten title here. So Stephen Buchanan's going to be the favorite. Barr is going to have to go through Cardenas again, and it was so close. I would not be surprised if Cardenas gets his revenge against Barr. But even in that instance, Cardenas against Buchanan, it is no guarantee that Buchanan wins either.
The interesting part about that, you mentioned AJ Ferrari being in the mix when we get to nationals, is whoever wins this, the path is going to be, you'd anticipate, so much better to get back to a national championship match at 197. So the importance of this, we talk about all the time, look, they're going to be in, all these top level guys are going to be wrestling in nationals. You don't worry about it, but the potential path at 97, I think, is going to be so much better for the number 1 seed. This might be one of the more important winners who comes out of 197.
It's the same thing with 141. If you drop that and end up having to wrestle an Andrew Ramirez at the other side of the bracket, because whomever wins, Jesse Mendez or maybe Andrew Ramirez is the number. I have to bring up 141 because it's so intriguing to me, where Andrew Ramirez, maybe he's the number 1 seed because of how he does in his respective conference tournament, and then Bo Bartlett and Jesse Mendez wrestle again in the semifinal as 2 and 3 seeds. So we'll see how that ultimately goes. Heavyweight, we finally reached the end of it here. Gable Steveson, Greg Kerkvliet, that's a crash course matchup. I'm eager to see how close Greg Kerkvliet is to Steveson. If this is a multiple takedown advantage for Steveson, okay, then back to the drawing board. But I think Kerkvliet can keep this close, even though I think Steveson wins. Trent, this is actually a pretty loaded Big Ten heavyweight class. It's just so top heavy with Steveson and how unprecedented he is. Greg Kerkvliet's a defending Big Ten and NCAA champion, but Josh Heinzelman, Nick Feldman, Slavakuski, Luffman, Ben Keeter from Iowa. If it wasn't for Steveson and Kerkvliet just basically being so far ahead of the rest of the competition, I don't know that I could make a selection and make a prediction as far as who would come out on top amongst the rest of the competition. I don't know who's going to take 3rd place.
And you love that backside of the bracket. I think it's going to be incredibly intriguing what happens there. And then we get to culminate the Big Ten tournament, likely with Gable Steveson against Kerkvliet. I mean, just how great is that to end the Big Ten tournament? And that's how that thing's going to finish off. And we'll see these 2 undefeated guys going up against each other, number 1 and number 2. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible what we're going to get here. And at 285, maybe another one of those incredibly intriguing ones. Big Tens are going to be great. Excited for it.
Do you think Keeter can take 3rd? What's the likelihood that he takes 3rd?
I don't think so. I still, against some of those bigger wrestlers, those guys that are pushing right up at 285, he still has struggled. We know he's an incredible athlete, and he was a guy, just did not go well for him in his last duel against Oklahoma State. So I don't think so. Maybe 5th is kind of where I'm looking, maybe the high water mark for Ben Keeter.
If I have to go with the 3rd place choice, I'll go with Nick Feldman. I think if he's healthy too, I know he's been dealing with injuries. I think Nick Feldman is the best of that group, but the margin is so close between all 5 of those guys. Yeah. It is insane. That's going to do it for this Locked On crossover. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions and Locked On Hawkeyes previewing the Big Ten tournament. If you have thoughts, analysis you want to contribute, let us know your thoughts down in the comment section. Please leave a like and share this episode with friends and family. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions. Subscribe to Locked On Hawkeyes on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Trent, thanks so much for the time, and can't wait to do this again for NCAAs as well.